Hi, welcome to Flutter Junction. Today we are going to learn how to fetch API using Riverpod in Flutter. And Riverpod is the state management tool just like Provider and GetX and also Block. Right. And this is how our final application shall be looking. And let's go back and then come to our app again. And first we shall be seeing the circular progress indicator when our data is being loaded. And then when the data is loaded, we are going to show them on this list in our application. Okay, now let's get back to our topic. And for that we are going to use the two packages that you need to have to install into the add into the package.yaml file in the dependencies here. And dependencies, you need to add these packages here like as follows. Okay, after adding, now let's get back to our method.file. And first we need to create the mechanism to get the data from the API. And for that, let's create the new folder here and name it services, and then the file, new file, let's say API services, API underscore services dot start. And inside here we are going to create a class named, let's say, API services, and then create the method here. And to have the data, to get the data from the server, we need to have an endpoint, and this is going to be our endpoint here. You can see this is our endpoint. And now we are going to get the call the get method from the HTTP to get the data from this endpoint. And for that, okay, as it is await, we need to make it async, and then we need to import the response from HTTP to dart. Right here, what is happening is we are calling the get method from this endpoint, and then we are saving it into our response here. Right, and before that, let's get to our this endpoint and see how our data is being looking. And this is how our API JSON would be looking. You can see here we have page, per page, total pages, and we are not going to use this. We are only going to use this data and these attributes of the data: ID, email, first name, last name, and avatar. Okay, let's get back to our program. We check if our response is success or not, and for that we check if our status code is 200 or not. That means this status code 200 means our API is okay. And then whenever we don't get the data from the API, or we get some error, we are going to throw the exception from here. And now here we are going to get the data from our server and then decode it. Here we get the data from the server, and then if our response is okay, then we are here decoding our response body and then getting the data tag from here. As you can see, our response, this is our response, and we are only going to use this data and these attributes into our application. So we are using the data into our application here. All right, now we need to get the data in the form of object, so we need to create the model. Okay, let's create the new folder and then the new file name, let's say user model dot dart. And inside here we are going to create our user model class, and this is our user model class, and we are only taking ID, email, first name, last name, and avatar from our API. And then here this is our constructor, and then we are going to get the data in the form of JSON. So we are getting the data in the form of JSON from here in this constructor, and then we are going to return and this method, this constructor returns our data in the form of object, and then we can access them using the dot operator into our UI. Right, now let's get back to our API.services file. Okay, here now then we convert, we get the each items from this result and then convert them into the object, and then we return the list of object from here as follows. right. Let's import the user model. Okay, what actually here it is happening is we get the result, and then we are getting each item from this result, and then these items are converted to the object, and then we are returning the list from here, and this is how it is working inside the application. Okay, and now here we need to return the future, the list of user model. Okay, as the method is async, we need to have the future return from our this method, and this list of user model, that means we are going to return the list from here that, so we are using the list of user model. Now over here we need to return our provider from Riverpod provider. So here we do provider, and it takes the type, and for our case it will be API services, and then okay, let's import the provider from the Riverpod, and we need to import the Riverpod. Okay, and then it takes the type, and for our type it is the API services, and then it takes the function, and it takes the reference object, and then here the API services, and then we need to assign into the variable, and that would be our user provider, and the error should be gone now. Okay, now let's discuss what this provider is. In Riverpod, this provider is the entry point of the shared data, and the reason for using Riverpod is to maintain our state, which means that there will be data in our app, and we use this data in different places of our app, so that all the data are shared. Whatever we do, all the pages or UI will share this same data. Now Riverpod would help to create the shared state, which means the Riverpod calls the data, and that data could be shared, and if there is any change in the data, the Riverpod would like to know the UI that there is change in the data, and the Riverpod says, hey, there is change in the data, you need to update. So for this reason it takes the type, and in our case this is our class API services, and then it takes the object and this array, and then we return the our API services from here. And here this ref is more like the context, so uh, which is default in the Flutter framework, and we use this ref because we are using Riverpod to maintain our state, and then it returns the function, and it doesn't have to return the function here. And let's say for example we can also return the string from here. Let's say final xyz, and then provider of, let's say, API services. Okay, not API service here, we are going to return the string, and then the ref, and then the string, let's say hi Flutter, then we can close it. Okay, and this syntax is somehow same. You can see here we have the provider, and the type here it is string, and then we have the API services and the same reference object, and then here we are returning the function from here, but here we are returning the string. So the idea is, if you create the class, and for that class if you want to maintain the state, you need to inject this class inside the provider. So this is more like you are injecting the class in the provider. Now move over here, and then create the new folder name, let's say provider, and then the new file name, let's say data provider dot tar. And now inside this class we have this object of future provider, and this future provider is coming from the Riverpod, you can see here. So basically this future provider is useful if you want to create an asynchronous request, and for example over here we are doing the network call, you can see here, and which is the asynchronous. Over here we are doing the network call. Here we are doing the network call, and the data may not be available immediately, even though our provider will hold the data, but if there is change in the data, we would still not be able to know about the new change. As it is asynchronous request, it doesn't happen automatically, because here is the server involvement, so it is asynchronous request. Okay, let's remove this first and then go back to our data provider here. And in general, if you have asynchronous request, and for Flutter Riverpod you have to do that request, in fact ensure this user provider. And now over here you can see we are referring to this user provider, which was created earlier into our API.services, this global variable. But because, and this is the asynchronous request, so we need to wrap into the future provider. We don't know when our data would be ready, so we need to wrap it with the future provider. This future provider ensures us when the data is ready to use, and from this method we are from this reference we are calling this method get users. So here this provider also means like the instance of the class, this class API services, but the only difference is that you are wrapping it around the provider of the Riverpod, which means the shared state. So this data is in shared state, which means it could be shared across all the pages of the application, and at the same time using the user provider we could access all the methods or the properties. So what we are doing here, we are accessing using this user provider, we are accessing this get user method. And the another awesome benefit of this future provider is that it is the asynchronous request, and you can use these methods. You can see here error and data and loading state. So inside here when something goes wrong, we are going to show the error messages or error state, and whenever our data is loading, we have the loading state, we are showing the we can show the circular progress indicator, and when the data is ready to use, we can return our widget. So this is the beautiful benefit of the future provider. And also over here because we are listening to the data, we are observing if there is any changes in this user provider which is coming from the network request or API request. So that's why we are using this ref.watch. It means it says, hey, I'm watching you, this user provider, and says whatever happens, I need to get the data from the network. So after this we are ready to show our data into our UI. Now let's get back to our main.dart file, and okay, before that let's create the new folder. Let's name screens, and here let's create the new file named homepage.dart, and then the stateless widget, and let's say homepage. As we are going to use the Riverpod state management, so we don't need the stateful widget. So we need to find a method so that we could access this method, okay, data provider from here, this method into our homepage.dart. So for that we need to get the consumer widget from our Flutter Riverpod. Let's close this and let's import the material also first. Right, let's close this, and the error should be gone now, and it is showing the error here because it is going to take the ref here, and this consumer widget is more like the stateful widget. And as you click here, you can see it is extending the consumer stateful widget, and this consumer stateful widget eventually is extending the stateful widget. So this means this consumer widget is also an stateful widget, and this ref here is the Riverpod context. Using this we can reference our data provider. So here we are going to access this provider here, this user data provider, to access the data from here. So for that we need to coming back here, we need to ref.watch and open and user data provider, which is coming from our data provider class. You can see here this user data provider, and then we assign it into a variable, let's say name user data, and the error should be gone now. And over here I have created the scaffold, and then I have the app bar here with the title Riverpod example. And now here after app bar, let's create the body, and inside this body we are going to call this user data, and it is very special with contents of when. You can see here it provides us the methods for data, error, and the loading. Okay, let's close this. You can see clearly, you can see data, error, and the loading state. And as the name states here, the data should show the data, and error should show the error message, and when loading it shows the loading state or loading progress indicator. And for loading we are going to return a simple, here in center we are going to return our circular progress indicator, that means our loading indicator. And on error we are going to show our error message. Here it takes error, and this stack trace we are going to return our error message here. This means if we are getting the error, we are going to return the error into the text. We are going to show our error into the text. And you can see these all three properties are coming from our this provider, and if you are using the Riverpod provider, you are getting this access to these methods or parameters. Now coming back to data, you can see here it takes the function, and that return this the list of data. You can see here it takes the function with the list. So how to deal with it? So for that, so we are going to create a function method and then return for now, let's say only a container, and the error should be gone now. And we know that, and this data user data holds our data in the form of list. So inside here we are going to create the new list. That would be list of user model, and let's say name the user list, and then it gets the data user data dot map the and then it returns get the object, and we return the list. Alright, so what actually is happening here, we are taking this user data from here, and then we are mapping it and getting each item from here and returning each item, and then we are converting this iteration. After completing the iteration, we are returning this list. Right, now how to use this user list into our application. So this user list holds the information from the data, all the data that we are getting from the API. Now inside here I am going to have my list view dot builder here, my widget. You can see here list view dot builder, and our item count would be the length of the items that it holds, the user list holds. And then we have the other properties in the list view dot builder, item builder, which takes the context. For now it is empty, and then the index, and with this index we can access the data from our user list. And then the padding, it provides the padding, and we are using symmetric. From vertical we are using 4, and then with horizontal we are giving 8, and then inside the padding we have the card, and then inside card we have the list style. Here we are showing our joining our user list and the first name and the last name. You can see here we are taking the user list and then the index of the user list and the first name. That means we are getting the first name of the index of the user list, and then similarly to the last name also. And then on subtitle we have the email. As you can see here, it is the name is here and the other is the email. And the leading we have the circle avatar, and we have the image, the user list index dot avatar. You can see here this is the leading circle avatar, and this is how our application will be is working. Now it's time to run our code. And now we have our application installing. Okay, we are getting the home page, demo home page, because we haven't added our home page to our main.dart file. We need to go to our main.dart file, and let's clean this first, and then this also we don't need this, and let's add them also. And here we are going to call our home page, and we are not passing anything from in this home page. Also that we are not only getting this data from our home page, because we need to wrap our my app with the provider scope. We are using the Flutter Riverpod. We need to wrap our my app with our provider scope, and so for that we are going to wrap it with a widget. Okay, widget, and then name it provider scope, and this provider scope is coming from the Flutter Riverpod. And then let's remove this cons from here, and then okay, now we are ready to go. Now let's restart our application again. You can see we are showing our circle progress indicator, and then we have our data loaded. Again, let's restart it. We can see the circular progress indicator, and it was so fast that we cannot see. So let's run it again, and then we see our circular progress indicator loading indicator. You can see here it is loading, and then our data is being shown. So what basically it is happening here is whenever we come to our main.dart file, we wrap it with our provider scope with our Flutter Riverpod, and then into our home page. In the build method, you can see into our home page we extend our consumer widget, and then we pass the Riverpod context ref, and then we watch our user data provider, and then we get the data into our variable user data. And whenever our application goes to our user data provider, it calls the future provider and ref, and then it calls again it access the user provider from our API services, this API services, and from this API services we are calling this API services function, and here we are getting the data from this get users. As you can see here, this get user method is called, and after calling this get users we are getting the response, and then we are returning the list here. After getting the list from our response body, we are accessing the data from our API. And for this application it may be different regarding your API, and after that we are returning the list of future model. We are returning the list of user model, and in the future, because it is asynchronous. And then after getting the data, and it is watching our user data provider, and after getting the data from the get users, and we are calling this user data provider, we can access the data from home page here. And after getting the data, we are finally assigning the data to our user data, and then in our body we are accessing the data, this user data dot when, and this is when is provided by our Flutter Riverpod. And here we can see the three parameters: data, error, and loading. And this loading is used to show the circular progress indicator when our data is loading. This is the loading state, and whenever we are getting the error, we are returning the error into the text form. And when our data is ready to use, we are returning the list. We are accessing this user data and then mapping, and then we are returning the list of user list. And this user list is used in our widgets. And you can see here user list, index, first name, email, and then the avatar. So to check the error, we can go to our API services, and then let's remove the endpoint. Okay, let's delete this and then restart our application again. You can see here we are getting the error here: format exception, unexpected character at our doctype HTML. This means we are getting the error in the text form. And then we again remove this and restart it again, and it should be fine now, and it is working fine, right? And in this tutorial you learned how to use Riverpod to fetch API from the internet. And if you have any queries regarding this tutorial, you can ping me on comment section, or you can also mail at flutterjunction@gmail.com. And if you like this video, don't forget to like, comment, and share it with your friends. And also, if you haven't subscribed the channel, don't forget to subscribe and press the bell icon so that you can get notified on upcoming videos. Thank you. Happy coding.